Well, hello everybody. It is Dearon again from the South Carolina Trucking Association. I am your Director of Safety and Compliance, and I just wanted to come to you today to discuss a little bit about the Brake Safety Week next week, okay? So that is the CVSA Brake Safety Week, and I just want to give you a couple of tips, okay? Now, how do we prepare for this? What should we expect, okay? So next week is August 21 through the 27th, and so we want to be very mindful that we'll probably see an increase in commercial motor vehicle enforcement. Inspectors are out on the road. So this will be going across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And what the Brake Safety Week is all about is an outreach and enforcement campaign aimed to reduce the number of crashes caused by faulty brake systems on CMVs. So we know how how important it is to make sure that we're able to stop these 80,000-pound vehicles or stop these commercial motor vehicles. So we need to make sure that the brakes are working. So that's what this Brake Safety Week is all about. It's not there to make anybody feel bad or to profile anybody. We have to make sure that the roads are safe, okay? So let's look at some statistics. So in 2021, 12% of the 35,764 vehicles inspected were declared out of service for brake-related violations. That's huge, okay? So we have to make sure that we are being not predictive, as one of my folks said, preventative. We have to be proactive when it comes down to compliance. So that is a lot of vehicles declared out of service for brake-related issues. So brakes are the most critical component on a CMV. So if we mash the gas and go fast, we need to be able to slow it down. So that's why we need to make sure we're doing what we need to do to make sure that we can stop these 80,000-pound vehicles, okay? Stopping power and performance technologies are linked to how well brakes and well ends perform. So pretty much when you think about this, every component pretty much on a CMV has something tied back to the brakes, okay? All the technology that we have, especially if you have anti-lock brake systems, you may have lane avoidance, crash avoidances, that technology built into your vehicles is all going to tie back to the braking system, okay? So this is why this is so important. I want to make sure that we are well informed about next week, and not just next week, but anytime we put a vehicle out on the road, we want to make sure that that vehicle is safe. Amen. All right. So Brake Safety Week, what to expect. So you'll have a bunch of roadside inspectors across the country doing these inspections. What are they going to be checking for? Okay, well, they're going to be checking for brakes, but what specifically when we start talking about brakes, okay? Missing brakes. Wow. Non-functioning brakes, loose, contaminated brakes. When you have grease or oil, especially if you have just serviced your brakes, you need to make sure that there's no extra contamination on the brake linings, okay? Holes caused by rust throughout rubbing or friction. So if you're having vehicles operating in the northeast part of the country, it's not snowing now, so we don't have to worry about salt and stuff eating up the brakes, but you may have vehicles that go inside of the woods. You may have vehicles that are on construction sites. So there are certain objects that may pierce or put a hole inside of a brake chamber. Broken springs in the spring brake housing of the parking brake, okay? So inside the brake chamber you have springs that you need that would probably have to be an internal service item that needs to be inspected by your mechanics. We need to listen out for air leaks around brake components, air reservoir tanks. So we need to this is just simply just walking up to a vehicle and just listening. You may hear an air leak. You may notice that the vehicle is leaning to one side, or you may notice that the mud flaps are touching the ground. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it, but it could be an indicator that you may have a brake system component that may have a defect, okay? Air pressure in the target range. So pretty much from my days on the road inspecting vehicles, we always like to make sure that we have at least 100 pounds of air pressure, okay? So you want to make sure that your vehicle can maintain air pressure between 90 and 100 psi, okay? So just make sure your air pressure gauges and indicators that gives you the warnings before something happens, that we pay attention to those, okay? I do remember a gentleman that I stopped one time. It was like, okay, your vehicle checked out perfectly, but I noticed on his dashboard that there was a piece of tape. So I ran my finger across it. When you peeled it back, he was just covering up the ABS light because he knew there was a defect, okay? So just be aware of those things. Something else they'll be checking for, slack adjusters, okay? Maybe they're not at the same length, okay? Slack adjusters. Most vehicles now are equipped with automatic slack adjusters. So we want to make sure that the slack adjusters are in their proper length and it's in place. I have driven a vehicle where the slack adjuster was missing, okay? Mismatch air chamber sizes or cross axles, okay? So we want to make sure that if we got type 30s, then we may have some 30 longs, but we don't want to have a 24 on the same axle of a type 30 brake chamber, okay? So they'll be checking for mismatch air chamber sizes, so cross axles. Warning devices, we mentioned that already, ABS lights, indicators. Those are tricky. Some vehicles are equipped where they go through, you put the key in the on position, and they go through a check system deal, and it goes all the way through. You hear it go pss, 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 and it'll cut off. Some lights stay on, some light goes off. It just depends on the vehicle, okay? So you want to make sure that those devices are working properly. Brake hose and tubing, chafing, all right? These things are critical. You have to make sure that we're actually looking at making sure the brake hose, especially between the tractor and the trailer, that they're not on the catwalks just scrubbing and rubbing on each other. So you want to make sure that all your brake hosing are not chafing, they're not kink, and they don't have any air leaks. So one of the easiest ways I used to do it is just have the old soap and water. And most inspectors probably didn't do this, but you can spray it and kind of see. Most time you can hear it or rub your hand on your brake hoses to see if you're feeling the air coming out. These are just some things that the inspectors will probably be looking for, okay? So how do we prepare for this big event? Well, we should have been prepared the whole entire time. This is just some quick safety tips to help you prepare. Pre-trips, encouraging our drivers to do pre-trips. I like to encourage them to do en-route inspections, okay? When they're loading or unloading and they're not participating in it, get out and walk around the vehicle. You may see something that happened while you were on the road. Post trips at the end of the day, walking around. I love it when I go in a safety meeting and I ask drivers, well, how long does it take to do a pre-trip? And they just all say, well, 15 minutes. Some say 30, some say, 45 minutes. But the regulation says once the driver is content, I'm paraphrasing, that the safe operation of that vehicle is safe to operate, then they can leave. But, of course, you don't want to show a 2-minute pre-trip and then go down the road and get a rap sheet full of violations on a roadside inspection. So I would always encourage you to help your drivers or give them the tools that they need to be successful in the area of doing pre-trips and post-trips, okay? These inspections can go a long way as a preventative measures to detect issues. If the drivers are checking the vehicles and know how to do it, they should be able to detect certain violations, not only brakes but lights and everything, because, of course, when they're doing these inspections, they'll probably be checking lights and driver paperwork, CDLs and things like that. But the driver should be doing pre-trip, en-route inspections, and post-trip inspections, all right? Every day they should be checking for loose and hanging air chambers, push rods, slack adjusters, broken springs, listening for leaks. We kind of discussed that already. What's the difference between drums or different types of brakes, or drums different from disc brakes? So we have you have a brake chamber that has a push rod in the back, and then you have disc brakes, okay? So when we start talking about air brakes, so we're talking about those, you have to measure the push rod from the back of the chamber to the clevis pin with the brakes release, and then again after a full charge brake application. I don't like the way you keep pressing the brakes for each one. It's just you got 100 pounds of air pressure, you mash the brake pedal. Once the brakes are released, and you mark it with soapstone, you mash the brake and you measure between the push rod to the clevis pin, okay? The maximum length depends upon the brake chamber type and the size, so you can refer to the Appendix G in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, all right? When we start looking at disc brakes, it's a little bit hard to inspect. So disc brakes include an internal adjustment mechanism. So the internal adjustment mechanism significantly lowers the risk of out-of-adjustment violations, okay? So just make sure that when it comes down to disc brakes, they're going to probably be looking for rust, indications that, you got the required measures in your brake linings, okay? So it's a bunch of things a little bit different from disc brakes and air brakes. We used to have where drivers would come in and they would just say, well, as long as I crank down on it and back off a half a turn, then I'm good. That's not the proper way to, especially if it's equipped with automatic slack adjusters. That's the whole purpose of the slack adjuster, okay? Manual brakes, you probably don't see too many of them anymore, but even with that, I'm still not comfortable with cranking down and backing off a half a turn. Not good, okay? All right, well, I think that will wrap it up for us today. Ladies and gentlemen, you make sure that you have a great week next week. Have an awesome weekend. Brake Safety Week is next week. Just remember, we need to be safe, we need to be compliant, and we need to be profitable. So this ends my session today. I hope that you learned something from it, and we'll see you soon.